Dad perfect events. I was sitting at the dinner table, passing the mashed potatoes, when my son Leonard looked up from his plate and said the words that changed everything. Dad, what's your long-term plan here? You can't live with us forever. The name's Richard Coleman, by the way. I'm 59 years old, and at that moment I had a $23 million lottery ticket folded up in my wallet, sitting right there in my back pocket. But let me start from the beginning, because this story makes a lot more sense when you know how I got there. 2 years ago, my wife Barbara died from cancer. We'd been married 34 years, raised 2 kids together, and I thought I had everything figured out. I was a mechanical engineer, worked for the same company for 35 years, had a good pension, owned my house outright. Then Barbara got sick, and between the medical bills and losing her income, well, let's just say I wasn't in the best financial shape when she passed. My son Leonard, he's a software developer, makes good money, lives in Phoenix with his wife Vicky and their 2 kids. Tyler, who's 13, and Emma, who's 10. After Barbara's funeral, Leonard stood in my kitchen in Tucson and said, "Dad, you shouldn't be alone right now. Come stay with us for a while." That for a while turned into 2 years. Leonard's got a nice house, 4 bedrooms, pool in the back, 3-car garage. His wife Vicky, she's a real estate agent, always talking about property values and market trends. She decorated the place in what she calls modern farmhouse style. Everything's white and gray with those wooden signs that say things like "Gather and Blessed," cost more than my first car probably. They gave me the guest room at the end of the hall. Window faces the neighbor's fence. I was told not to rearrange anything because it might affect the home's flow. That should have been my first clue. For the first few months, I tried to be helpful. I fixed the garbage disposal, helped Tyler with his math homework, drove Emma to soccer practice when they asked. I kept my stuff in one corner of the garage, tried not to take up too much space. But I started noticing things. Like how Vicky would introduce me to her friends as Leonard's father who's staying with us temporarily. Or how they'd go out to dinner as a family and just leave a note saying they'd be back later. Or the time I overheard Vicky on the phone with her sister saying, "He eats our food, uses our utilities, and contributes what exactly?" I stood in that hallway for a long time after hearing that. Then I went back to my room and closed the door real quiet. The lottery ticket happened by accident. I'd stopped at a gas station on my way back from a doctor's appointment. One of those routine checkups they make you do when you hit your late 50s. The machine was right there by the register. I bought 1 ticket, same numbers I'd been playing for maybe 10 years. Barbara's birthday, our anniversary, the kids' birthdays. Tucked it in my wallet and forgot about it. 4 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee and the newspaper. Leonard and Vicky had already left for work, kids were at school. I pulled out that ticket to throw it away, figured I'd check the numbers real quick. I checked them twice, then 3 times. Then I sat there staring at that piece of paper like it might disappear. $23 million. After federal and state taxes, about $14 million. I didn't make a sound. I folded that ticket back up, put it in my wallet, and didn't say a word to anyone. That was February. The dinner happened in March. It was a Tuesday night, nothing special. Vicky had made pot roast, which was actually pretty good. Tyler was on his phone. Emma was complaining about some girl at school. Leonard was eating fast, the way he does when he's tired from work. I was passing the potatoes when he said it. "Dad, what's your long-term plan here? I mean, what are you thinking?" The table went quiet. Vicky looked down at her plate. Tyler put his phone in his lap. Emma stopped mid-sentence about the mean girl. I looked at my son. He's got my hairline. Unfortunately going gray at 35. He wasn't being cruel about it. That's what made it worse. He was just tired, asking a practical question like he was discussing quarterly reports. I set down the bowl of potatoes. I folded my napkin. I pushed back my chair and stood up. "Excuse me," I said, and I walked outside. The backyard was cold that evening, pool covered for winter. I sat in one of those patio chairs nobody ever uses and looked up at the Phoenix sky, orange and purple, like a painting Barbara would have liked. I thought about a lot of things sitting out there. About how I'd spent 35 years building a career, 34 years building a marriage, 37 years being a father. About how I'd helped Leonard with his down payment on this house. About how I'd been making myself smaller and smaller for 2 years, trying not to be a burden. And I thought about that ticket in my wallet. I stayed outside for over an hour. When I came back in, the kitchen was cleaned up and everyone had gone to their rooms. Nobody knocked on my door to check on me. Nobody asked if I was okay. Just silence. I lay awake until 2 in the morning, and in those quiet hours, I made some decisions. First, I was going to claim that lottery prize, and I was going to do it right. I'd spent 35 years negotiating contracts and managing projects. I knew how to handle this kind of thing. Second, I was going to find out exactly what Vicky and Leonard really thought about my situation. Not what they said to my face, but what they said when they thought I couldn't hear. Third, I was going to get my own place. Not because I was angry, but because a man my age should have his own front door and his own key to lock it. The next morning, I was up at 6. I showered, put on my good shirt, and came downstairs before anyone else was awake. I made coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I started with estate attorneys in Phoenix, found 3 that specialized in financial privacy. By the time Vicky came downstairs in her heels, I had appointments booked under my full name, Richard Allen Coleman. She looked at me with this surprised expression, like she'd expected me to still be hiding in my room. "Good morning," I said. She poured her coffee and left for the office without another word. The attorney was a woman named Jennifer Martinez. Sharp, probably early 60s, ran a small practice in Scottsdale. When I called, her assistant was professional and discreet. That discretion was what I was paying for. I told Leonard I had a doctor's appointment. First lie I'd told my son in probably 20 years. I sat with that for a minute in the car, then decided I could live with it. Jennifer's office was quiet, comfortable, no TV blaring in the waiting room. She stood up when I came in, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Mr. Coleman, you mentioned on the phone this was sensitive. That means it stays here. Tell me what's happened." I told her everything. The lottery ticket, the amount, my living situation, Leonard's question at dinner. I laid it out like I was presenting project specs to a client. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. First question, she said, "Have you signed anything with the Lottery Commission? Told anyone your name?" "No, nobody knows except you." "Good." She pulled a legal pad toward her. "Arizona allows lottery winners to claim through a trust, which keeps your name out of public records. We'll establish that before you claim. We also need to discuss a financial advisor. I have 2 I trust completely." I left her office 2 hours later with a folder of documents and the phone number of a financial advisor named Gerald Murphy. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like myself again. Over the next 3 weeks, I moved carefully. Met with Gerald, who walked me through investment strategies and tax implications without making me feel stupid for asking basic questions. The trust was set up under the name Coleman Family Holdings, LLC. The lottery was claimed quietly. The money went into a private account at a bank across town. At home, I kept my routine exactly the same. Same breakfast, same quiet evenings, same man they'd been overlooking for 2 years. But I was listening now, really listening. It was Vicky who noticed first. Real estate agents are good at noticing things that might affect their commissions. She mentioned it to Leonard on a Thursday evening. I heard it from the hallway. Those walls aren't as thick as they think. He's been going out more. I saw some legal documents on the kitchen table before he took them to his room. A pause, probably just stuff from Mom's estate, Leonard said. "Your mother's estate was settled 2 years ago." Another pause. "I'll ask him." He asked me the next morning over coffee. Real casual, like he'd practiced it. "Dad, everything okay?" "Vicky mentioned you've had some appointments. Nothing medical, I hope." I looked at my son over my coffee cup. His face was concerned. Underneath the concern, something watchful. "I'm fine, Leonard. Just some administrative things to get in order. Paperwork never ends when you get to be my age." He nodded and let it go. But I noticed that evening, Vicky left her laptop open on the counter in a way that seemed accidental but wasn't. And I noticed the folder in my room, the one I kept locked in a small filing box I'd bought at Office Depot, had been moved about half an inch to the left. Someone had been trying to get into it. I sat on my bed looking at that folder for a long time. Then I drove to a FedEx office, made copies of everything inside, and had them sent to Jennifer's office for safekeeping. The house I found was in a neighborhood I'd been driving through on my way to appointments. Older trees, proper front porches, the kind of street where kids still rode bikes. I'd already been working with a real estate agent named Linda Thompson, someone who worked a different area than Vicky. I'd been careful about that. One house in particular caught my attention. 3 bedrooms, a workshop in the garage, a yard big enough for a garden. Good bones, as Barbara would have said. The kind of house that felt like it was waiting for the right person. When I made the offer, full asking price, cash through the trust, Linda called me from her car. "Richard, they accepted, clean and fast, just like you wanted." 30-day close, I stood on the sidewalk in the February sunshine and let those words settle. Mine. I hadn't felt that word applied to a place since I'd sold the house in Tucson. I said nothing at home. I continued to be the quiet man at the end of the hall. But information has a way of getting around in the real estate business. Vicky found out through a networking contact who mentioned Linda was closing a big cash deal. It took Vicky about 2 days to connect the dots. She came to my room on a Saturday morning. Didn't knock. I was at my small desk when the door opened. Vicky closed it behind her and got straight to the point. "You bought a house." I turned from my desk. I was wearing my reading glasses and the sweater Leonard had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. "I've been looking for a place," I said. "A 3-bedroom house on Maple Street. Cash transaction through something called Coleman Family Holdings." She crossed her arms. Where did the money come from, Richard? I have some savings. Leonard and I discussed your finances after Barbara's estate was settled. You had enough to live on, not enough to buy a house in this market. I noticed she said Leonard, and I discussed your finances like she was talking about the weather, like my money was household business. Things change, I said. Her eyes narrowed. She was doing math in her head. Did you inherit something? An account we didn't know about? I took off my reading glasses and set them on the desk. Vicky, I said, is there a reason you feel entitled to know about my personal finances? The temperature in the room dropped. She was quiet for the right amount of time, the silence of someone changing tactics. We've supported you for 2 years, Richard. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go. I think we deserve some transparency. There it was. We took you in. You've been very generous, I said, and I'm grateful. I'll be out within the month. I turned back to my desk. She didn't leave. If you've come into significant money, she said, and now her voice had an edge. Leonard is your son. He's your heir. He has a right to know. There are tax implications, estate planning considerations. I have an attorney and a financial advisor, I said without turning around, both very competent. Richard? Her voice got sharper. If you're hiding assets and something happens to you, it creates legal complications for this family, for Leonard. You should think about that. I set down my pen. I've thought about everything very carefully. I said, thank you. She left. The door closed harder than it had opened. Leonard came to my room that evening. He sat on the edge of the narrow guest bed and looked at his hands. Vicky's upset, he said. I noticed, Dad. He looked up. Is there something going on financially that we should know about? I mean, I know what I said at dinner was. I could have put it better. I'm sorry about that, but this feels like... Vicky says you were evasive and it's making us worried. Worried, that was the word he chose. I looked at my son. I thought about the 8-year-old who'd cried when our dog Max died. I thought about the college kid who'd called to tell me he'd gotten his first programming job. I thought about the 35-year-old who'd asked me about my long-term plan without looking up from his plate. You don't need to worry about me, I said quietly. I'm going to be fine, he waited. When I didn't say anything more, he nodded slowly and left. The closing was set for Thursday of the following week. I drove to the house alone the day before and sat in my car outside for 20 minutes. The oak tree in the front yard was starting to bud. I thought Barbara would have loved the front porch. The shift in atmosphere at Leonard's house was noticeable after our conversation. Vicky started making breakfast again, something she hadn't done since my first week there. French toast and fresh coffee, setting a place for me without being asked. Morning, Richard, she said, wearing her good earrings. Sit down, it's almost ready. Tyler looked up from his phone with a confused expression. Emma hummed under her breath. The breakfast was excellent, and I said so. Over the following week, I was invited on errands. Leonard started coming home for dinner more consistently. Emma showed me her homework. Tyler, miracle of miracles, brought me a bag of those licorice candies I'd mentioned, liking once about 6 months ago. It was well executed. I recognized it because I'd spent 35 years watching contract negotiations. The good engineers my old boss used to say knew that the most dangerous moment was when the other party stopped pushing and started smiling. They wanted to know about the money. They wanted to reposition themselves before I left. I wasn't cold to them. I was present and pleasant. I thanked Vicky for breakfast. I talked with Leonard about work. I ate Tyler's licorice. But I didn't tell them anything. The movers came on Saturday. Small company, discreet, recommended by Jennifer's office. By afternoon, my boxes were in the new house, and I was sitting on my own front porch with a beer, watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes. I'd sent Leonard a text that morning. Moved out today. Room is clean. Thanks for everything. Let's get together soon. He didn't reply for 6 hours. When he did, are you okay? I answered. Yes, very much so. Leonard called me Thursday to invite me to Sunday lunch at his house. His in-laws would be there, Vicky's sister Amy, and the kids. He presented it as an olive branch. I said yes. I also called Jennifer and told her what I was walking into. We talked for an hour. When I arrived Sunday at noon, the table was set for 9. Vicky's parents were there, Gary and Linda, polite people in their 60s who'd always been kind to me. Amy and her husband sat nearby. The kids moved between rooms. It looked warm. It was designed to look warm. I greeted everyone, accepted a glass of water, and sat in the chair they'd placed deliberately in the corner. The observer's seat. Lunch was served. Conversation covered weather, the kids' school, a trip Gary and Linda were planning. Vicky let it run for about 40 minutes before she moved. I want to say something. She began, addressing the table. I think family should be able to talk about hard things. She looked at me. We're worried about Richard, Gary, and Linda turned to me with concern. Amy arranged her face into sympathy. Richard has recently made some significant financial decisions without consulting any of us. Without consulting Leonard, who is his son and closest family. We've tried to understand what's happened, and he hasn't been forthcoming. She paused. We believe he may have come into money and is being guided by people he's only recently met in ways that could be harmful. As a family, we need to address this. The table went quiet. I reached down and opened the leather folder I'd brought. I appreciate the concern, I said. My voice was level. Since we're talking about it openly, let me be open. I looked around the table. In February, I won the state lottery. The prize after taxes was approximately $14 million. I let that sit for a moment. I didn't tell anyone in this household because I wanted to understand my situation clearly before making decisions. I hired a licensed attorney and a certified financial advisor. I bought a house. I've done all this legally and with proper guidance, complete silence. What I can also tell you, I continued, looking directly at Vicky, is that 2 weeks before I claimed the prize, I heard a conversation about how I was eating your food and using your utilities without contributing. I can tell you that my personal documents were searched in my room. And I can tell you that every expression of warmth in this house over the past few weeks happened exactly when it became clear I had engaged an attorney. I opened the folder and pulled out a piece of paper. I have recordings of conversations about my cost-benefit ratio to this household. I have evidence of attempted access to my personal files. I have documentation of everything. Vicky's face had gone white. I haven't made a single decision that harms anyone at this table. My estate is properly managed. Leonard is provided for in my will, and I'm living in my own home for the first time in 2 years. Gary cleared his throat. Linda's hand was at her mouth. Vicky said, "You're being unfair." "I'm being precise," I said. "There's a difference." Leonard looked up. His face was pale. "Dad," he started. "I love you," I said, which was true and seemed to surprise him. "I'll continue to love you, but I'm not going to manage my life around the anxiety of people who saw me as a problem to solve." I looked at him steadily. "When you're ready for a real conversation, I'm at 847 Maple Street. Amy, Vicky's sister, spoke up quietly. "Vicky, you said he was hiding money from the family." "This doesn't sound like hiding." Vicky turned to her sister with sharp eyes. "Stay out of this." But Gary, Vicky's father, was looking at his daughter with an expression I recognized. Disappointment. "Victoria," he said, using her full name the way parents do when they're not pleased. "Did you go through Richard's personal belongings? I was concerned about, did you?" Silence. I stood up, gathered my folder, and said goodbye to Gary and Linda and the kids. Outside in my car, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I drove home to my house, where the oak tree was fully leafed out. The fallout happened faster than I expected. Amy called me 2 days later. "Richard, I want you to know Gary and Linda are furious with Vicky. They've told Leonard they expect him to apologize to you properly." A week later, Jennifer called with an update that surprised me. "Mr. Coleman, I thought you should know. Vicky Coleman has been reported to the Arizona Real Estate Commission for unethical conduct. Apparently, she's been accessing property records inappropriately, searching for information on your transactions." "Who reported her?" "I believe it was her own networking contact, the one who mentioned your house purchase to her professional ethics violation. She could lose her license." I felt something settle in my chest, not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that actions had consequences. Leonard called twice that week. The first time I let it go to voicemail. His message was careful. "Dad, I'd like to talk. I know Sunday was I haven't handled things well. Please call when you're ready." I called him back. We talked for 45 minutes. He did most of the talking, apologizing specifically rather than generally. He said the dinner question was wrong. He said he'd let Vicky take the lead too often. He said he'd been uncomfortable with the situation at home for a long time but had handled it by looking away. At the end, I said, "Leonard, I'm not closing the door, but I need you to understand something. I'm not the man who sits quietly at the end of the hallway anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be between equals." Long pause. "Okay," he said quietly. We made plans to meet for coffee the following week, just the two of us. It's been 8 months now. Leonard and I meet every couple of weeks. The conversations are careful, but we're both trying. Tyler and Emma come over on Saturdays sometimes. Emma helps in the garden I planted in the backyard. Tyler found my old engineering books and asks good questions about load calculations. Leonard and Vicky separated in September. She lost her real estate license in October after the ethics investigation found she'd been accessing client information inappropriately for personal use. Word got around the industry fast. In real estate, reputation is everything. I didn't feel good about the separation. Whatever Vicky did, she's still the mother of my grandchildren, but I didn't cause it. People's choices have weight. Leonard moved into a smaller place with the kids. Money's tighter now, but he seems lighter somehow. Free of something that had been pressing down on him. I've got a life now, a real one. My neighbor Harold and I work on projects in our garages. I cook what I want, when I want. I sit on my front porch in the evenings and wave to the kids on bikes. I updated my will through Jennifer. Leonard gets 30% when I'm gone. My daughter Nancy in Oregon gets 40%. She's the one who called every week and sent flowers on my birthday. The remaining 30% goes to an engineering scholarship fund at the local community college. Barbara would have approved. At 59, I learned something I should have learned earlier. You don't get respect by making yourself smaller. You get it by knowing what you're worth and acting like it. I had $14 million, but the decision that changed everything happened at a dinner table when I folded my napkin and walked away. The money was a door. Walking away was the key. If someone in your life has been making you feel like a burden, if you've been shrinking yourself to fit into a space you were never meant to occupy, I want you to know this. It's never too late to stand up. What would you have done at that dinner table? I'd like to know. Dignity isn't something you inherit or lose with age. It's something you choose to claim every single day, regardless of what others think you deserve. The most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone else's life. It's building a life so good that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant.